Okay, how's everyone going today? My name's Joshua Valenci and I'm from the New South Wales branch of ASEG. And today we've got two speakers from the Geological Survey of New South Wales. We've got Dr. Samuel Matthews and we've got Astrid Carlton. I'll introduce the speakers shortly. Thanks to all our corporate members for the ASEG Society. And also to our branch sponsors. In particular, for the New South Wales branch, we have GBG Australia. So thank you very much. Just some Zoom housekeeping. If you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A. And they'll either be answered during the talk or they'll be answered at the end. Just some quick member benefits. We actually have an early bird offer at the moment for ASEG. So if you sign up before December 1st, you'll get a generous discount on your 2022 membership. You also get access to the bi-monthly preview magazine, which I do recommend. It's quite good. And also access to the online journal. And there's free membership for students. So if you're a student, you have nothing to lose. Should also just mention, we also have the New South Wales branch has their annual dinner on the 1st of December. So just refer to your email and make sure you apply. There's a limit of 30 people for that event. So get in early before spaces fill up. And remember, you can contact us or get in touch via Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube. We've been recording a lot of our talks recently, and we have about 50 to 60 talks recorded on the YouTube channel for the past year or two, so definitely check it out. Now to our speakers. Our first speaker is Sam Matthews. He studies his Bachelor of Science at Macquarie University and completed a PhD in geophysics and modelling, and he completed that in 2019. After several years of working at Alpha Geoscience, Sam joined the Geological Survey of New South Wales as a geophysicist, and he's been working there for about 3 years. His key roles at the survey include the stewardship, management, and quality assurance of all legacy geophysics performed in New South Wales. He's going to give us his talk, and he's going to show us some features of MinView. Our second speaker is Astrid Carlton. Astrid is a senior geophysicist at the Geological Survey of New South Wales as well, and she's been working there since, it should actually say 2007. Astrid completed her honours with Bachelor of Science at Macquarie University in 2002. She currently works on regional geophysical acquisition programs and interpretation projects. So I'm going to hand over to Sam Matthews and he will present.
Thanks, Josh. All right. Hopefully my screen is sharing, Josh.
Yep, I can hear you well and I can see your screen.
Great.
Over to you.
Okay. So there's my title. I'll be talking about enhancing statewide geophysics with high resolution company data. I've given this talk before, so you may have seen it if you attended AEGC, but don't worry, I will make it a bit more interactive this time and I'll be able to pace it a bit better because with AEGC, with a very short time period, I had to sort of rush it in there. So, bit of an outline. It basically boils down to why, how, and what. And that's what I'll go through. So the motivation and the why. So we want to upgrade the old 2014 geophysical mergers. So I've highlighted here magnetic, but I can just give a little bit of a hint that the radiometric are also part of this. But for the most part, this talk will be focusing on the mag. So why? And because the 2014 merge, while it's an excellent product, it was created at a time when we didn't exactly have a great amount of lineage or metadata surrounding it. And that makes it a bit difficult to come back and update later. So as a consequence of that, just decided to bite the bullet and rebuild from scratch, and in the process sort of do it by all the best practices, all the best procedures. And some of the other benefits include the incorporation of company data, very high resolution company data. Also recent government geophysics that weren't in the previous merge, improved documentation, merge procedure as mentioned, and also the good part about addressing previously known artifacts, but very importantly is the 25-meter grid cell size. So the previous merge was 50-meter grid cell size, and you may think, okay, twice as good, but it's actually 4 times as good. Because if you picture a data grid, point, 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 and let's say that's your 50 meters, if you put a point in the middle, you've got 4 boxes now rather than 2. So that's why that's 4 times the data density. Okay, so the process behind the merge. There was an extensive QAQC done on all company and government geophysics, basically maintained by GSNSW. There are over 850 airborne surveys. They're all assessed for quality. Where necessary, there were errors fixed. And one very important thing is they were harvested for metadata. And it may sound like that's just tedious, busy work. I'll just log it into the database and, it's a waste of time. But this was actually one of the most important parts of the merge. And it feeds into the algorithm that was designed to quantitatively assess the survey quality of each survey. And I'll go into that in more detail later. So to start with, the QAQC. And just as an example here, some data salvage. So I'm sure several people in the room are aware of some of the old standards going back into the 80s and 70s, like NCOM data pulled off magnetic tapes. And the screenshot I'm showing here, for instance, is 28 million characters of data in one single hideous string going about 3 kilometers off the screen to the right. And that's unusable, like by any modern software. It's just the computers have a heart attack just trying to read that. So as part of the QAQC, I actually wrote just a short little script that was able to convert this kind of old legacy data into ASEG GDF2 format. So you actually get some sanity out of it. We've got the same amount of data, but it's now packed into 466,000 lines. And doing that, it was able to actually salvage a great deal of sort of awesome legacy data that was just sort of sitting there doing nothing. And that's just one example of the QAQC. I'm sure anyone who's done it before knows that there's a hell of a lot more to it than that, but that's all I'll focus on for now. So here's the little screenshot of the metadata harvest. And don't squint your eyes, don't try and read all of this. It's not important. It's basically just, I'm showing you this basically to just highlight there were a lots of different things that we pulled out. It wasn't just a few things here and there. It was all sorts of metadata for the surveys. Here's just a look at the surveys that comprised, well, not comprised, here's a look at all of the company geophysics in New South Wales. And you can see there's a hell of a lot of it. Some of it's big merge products by companies, some of it's not even mag-rads, like you've got some big LiDAR surveys and stuff like that. But all of it, nonetheless, was QAQC'd and metadata harvested. So it's very important, and we pushed that out through MinView, and I'll just give a little demo on that later. So onto the survey selection algorithm I mentioned, and this is where the metadata harvest really shines. And I'll go into this in a little bit of detail, but don't worry if you don't quite get everything, because I'm more than happy to share or speak to you in person later on. I've written a little bit of a document about this, so I can share that if anyone wants to email me later as well. But so here's 3 surveys just selected, not quite at random, but we've got a 2012 company survey, Glenelg, a 1995 government survey, Brewarrina, and a 1991 government survey, Dubbo. And if we look over on the right-hand side, we can see their algorithm scores in the red box. And we can see Glenelg, it's got a perfect score for this algorithm of 500. Brewarrina has a score of 100, which we later realized that's about ballpark for a lot of the regional government surveys. So that's still a very good score. And then Dubbo, it's got a score of 7.8. And obviously that's far less than the others. So we can infer that it's, you know, but let's have a look at why these scores are like they are. So let's look at the line spacing. That's one important aspect of the metadata harvest and the algorithm. We can see Glenelg has a line spacing of 100 meters compared to Brewarrina at 250 and Dubbo at 400. So obviously the algorithm rewards the smaller line spacing and punishes higher. Same thing for clearance. So we've got a 40-meter clearance for Glenelg compared to all the way up to 100 meters for Dubbo. And now we can start to get an idea of why its algorithm score is so low. Area is another thing that plays into the algorithm. And I've had questions on this before, so I'll cut them off at the pass and hopefully explain it here. So why is area in a survey quality algorithm? And that's because basically with a 25-meter grid cell size on the merge, if area wasn't included, then all of the little postage stamp surveys that are flown at 25-meter line spacing and just cover sort of 20 square Ks, they would all shine with 500 scores. But the problem is, it's pointless putting them into the merge because all of that data just gets aliased away with the 25-meter cell size. So that way, because of that, area is then put in to eliminate some of those postage stamps, but then also reward some of the bigger surveys as well. And I'll show you the lookup table shortly. Sampling, and this is in Hertz, so we can see obviously Glenelg, far higher sampling rate than Brewarrina and Dubbo. Bearing is another one, but it's not quite as simple as it seems. So that's not just the bearing of the flight. This is actually the bearing of the survey relative to the strike of the geology underneath the region of the flight. And obviously some approximation needs to be made for this, but everyone in the room, I'm sure, knows that you don't want to fly an airborne, well, you don't want to perform any geophysics along strike. You're just going to get terrible data that way. You want to go perpendicular to strike. So all of these 3 surveys were done perpendicular to strike, so no punishment for any of them there. The final aspect is the year. And this one's really just a delimiter, essentially, of does it have GPS or does it not? So basically, it can just be boiled down to pre or post 1992. So with all of that in mind, that's how the algorithm scores are derived. And here now, as I promised, is the lookup table. And again, don't worry about screenshotting or trying to understand every piece of this right now, because I'm very happy to share it all with you later on. Just send me an email. But the basic premise is that all surveys start off with a perfect score, and then anything less than perfect in the survey design gets punished and points get removed along the way. And this wasn't just something that I cooked up on my own. So this was a collaborative effort with the geophysicists at the Geo Survey. So myself and Astrid and our 2 former colleagues, Ned Stoltz and Bob Musgrave. So all contributed to this, and we're quite happy with them, especially when viewing the output. So what we're looking at here is the company surveys in blue and the government surveys in red. And as I mentioned, there's that sort of roughly 100 plateau on the government surveys. And if I just put on my little quality cutoff there, we don't want to include any government companies' data that's going to depreciate the quality of the previous merge. So therefore, any company stuff under 100 gets snipped, not interested. But that still leaves about 300 surveys, and it's a wealth of data. So with that in mind, I'll kick off into the merge procedure now. And the very first thing we've got to do for any good statewide merge incorporating tons and tons of surveys is we need to unify the grid projection of every survey. You can do it into whatever grid projection you like, but it just needs to be unified. So for me, I used GDA 94, MGA 55. And as you can imagine, with data spanning 50 or 60 years, there are all sorts of fun projections in there, but fairly simple to do the reprojects, so that's okay. The next part though, grid sampling, this all needs to be unified as well, and this is a very important part. So as I mentioned, it's a 25-meter grid cell size for the merge, but you can't just take a 200-meter line space survey, as I'm using as my example, and grid that to 25 meters. That's basically spurious. The interpolation that you're doing there is just false. So what you do instead is you do a two-step process. So you take your 200-meter line-spaced survey and you grid that to 50 meters, about a quarter of the line spacing. That's about standard. And then you take your 50-meter grid and you run a resample on that. So you've got your mesh, and you've already done the interpolation of data points. So then the resample just basically adds points on the mesh without interpolation. It just gives you your 25-meter grid. So that's how the grid sampling is unified. From there, we need to determine the precise layering. And I say need, I mean, it's not strictly necessary. You can do a merge just by plopping things together and pressing go, but you get a far better product if you do precise layering and precise sort of clipping and buffering, which I will talk about in the next parts. So this little example I'm showing here in the picture, it's the Cobar survey highlighted in red and pink. It's the most recent publicly available MagRad survey we have, although Cobar AMR is just around the corner. But Cobar was flown in 2017, and it's got an algorithm score here in the brackets of 125. Included around it is everything that it shares an intersect with, everything that it shares a boundary with. So North Park, Surat, Narrabri, Gilgandra, and Liverpool Plains. Cobar has a higher score than everything except Liverpool Plains, so obviously it'll overlie all of these. And since it's newer than Liverpool Plains and the eyeball test says that the data is comparable, then Cobar can just sit on top. So with that in mind, I'll just toggle between these slides a couple of times so that you can see what's going on. But we can see the boundaries there are actually being clipped precisely to the edges of the surveys. But don't let me mislead you there. When I say precisely, it's precisely with a buffer. So if we zoom in on this little corner here of the Cobar survey, we can see a little buffer has been applied, because if you just do a plain jigsaw of the surveys, the grid merge is going to get confused and it's going to say, hey, I can't find anything to stitch this to. I can't find any like-for-like features. So that's why you do a buffer. And that same thought process, like it's looking for like-for-like features to merge on. That's why you don't want to just do a whole survey on top of another survey, because you want to make sure that you're getting the very best data over the majority of the survey area as possible, and you just leave the merge parts to do their thing. So with that in mind, the survey was done in a two-step process. And get a common question here, why? Well, it's basically to add an interim layer of QAQC. If you're taking 300 surveys and splatting them all together, there's so much more potential to introduce bugs, artifacts, just so much more room for things to go wrong. So to start with, all of the regional government surveys were merged together to form a base merge. And once that was QAQC'd, everything was happy, a few little tweaks were made, then you take your cookie cutter and snip out all of those company surveys with an internal buffer so that there's going to be an overlap. And then we paste on all of those company surveys on top, and it delivers just an excellent final product, which I'll be able to show off a little later. So that's the hard part. Then the easy part. So you've got, for me, I did it all in TMI. I have been asked before, well, why didn't you do it in, like, do it as well for an RTP or something? But it's just double the work. If you do it all on your TMI, that's your base layer. You can then filter it as you like, do an RTP. You can do your first and second vertical derivatives, your tilde angle filters. You can do all sorts of things. Like I'm calling custom and composite. Basically, it's just a way of saying different stuff. Bob Musgrave requesting an upward continuation of 20 kilometers. All right, easy. There you go, Bob. So just getting it done and ready to go is the most important thing. And then finally, reprojection. So as I mentioned, started in GDA 94 MGA 55, you can reproject that back out to whatever the hell you want, including GDA 2020, which is something we should all be moving towards at the moment. So a little bit of a before and after. On the left is the 2014 merge, and these are both colored by line spacing. We can see the key down the bottom. And on the right is the 2020 merge. This is the one that's currently available through MinView for visualization or download. And you look at it and, okay, there's a few things added. It doesn't look like it's too much, but it's actually a bit misleading. There is about 9% of the state covered with company data in this merge. And that only gets better. So if I turn that on now, on the left is the 2022 merge, which I can't show you the final product yet, confidential, sorry, but it's been made in the background and it's just a fantastic product. And we can see just the wealth of extra data that's being added to that. And just here again is just a look at the lineage of it, showing how the merges have been improved. So grey in the background is the 2014 merge. Green were the surveys that were added to the 2020 merge. See, we are including Coonabarabran, for instance, because that was a 2017 survey. And blue is the 2022 one. And also a lot of this kind of mess in around Cobar is also going to be supplemented with the Cobar AMR as well. So that's going to be added on top. And that's the best part about all of this sort of best process, is that once you've got it all sorted and once you trust your own process, then it's really just as simple as iterating. You don't have to remake everything from scratch. You can just plop in another survey when you get it. So it's a really powerful thing. Okay, products. So I'll show some pictures here, but I think I'll dip into a little bit of a MinView demonstration shortly. So TMI RTP, total magnetic intensity reduced to the pole. At this resolution, single slide, that's just a pretty tie-dye picture. So it's not until I get into MinView and zoom around that you'll really be able to appreciate the quality of this, but it's turned out to be an excellent product. And as we're all aware, so TMI RTP, it's very useful for explorers, it's very useful for geological mappers, it's just very useful. The RTP, the 1VD of the RTP, so first vertical derivative, and this one highlights and enhances a lot of the shallower features. And again, very useful for exploration, research, geology. It's just a great technique. This one is one that is not as well known. It's the tilt angle filter. So what the tilt angle filter does is basically it flattens the data. So we're not necessarily looking shallow or deep. We're just looking at a very enhanced boundary effect of all of the anomalies. And on its own, like, it looks pretty cool, but you can make it even better by making that a composite by adding a 50% transparency and plopping the RTP on top. So now we've got those really sharp geological boundaries that are picked up by the tilt, but then we've got some RTP, like actual colors to assign highs and lows to the data. So it's a very, very useful product. All right, data portal, which is MinView, and I'll take this opportunity to drag over my MinView window. So hopefully everyone can see MinView, but if you can't, Josh, just come in and tell me. But so what we're going to do, so this is MinView, and to find this, you can literally just Google MinView and it'll be the first thing to show up. So I'm going to focus this short little workshop on the geophysics that's in there, mainly the large scale geophysics, how you can access it, how you can see it, how you can download it. So we've got our layer pane over here, and I'll just open that again. And from in here, there's a bunch of folders. So if we look here, geophysical imagery, and then within there, there's some subfolders. Let's focus on the mag, and then we can turn on any layer we like. So there's the TMI RTP. That's the pretty picture I just showed you. But now the beauty of this is we're not just limited to this broad scale. We can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in. And with the 25-meter cell size, just the resolution on this is fantastic. It's, yeah, so good. Now, let's say you want this, this imagery. Okay, easy. We've got a tools function up here. We click on tools and then data download. And then a little bit of a menu pops up. We can click on geophysical imagery, select the format you like. So old ECWs, JPEG 2000, GeoTIFF, coordinate system of your choice, and you can pick the technique or the image of your choice. And then what's more, we can, if I was windowed in on an area, then you can just click to use current view and it'll clip that image for you. You don't have to have the whole statewide, or if you prefer, you can have the whole state, get it sent to your email address, and off it goes. So there's my email address. Feel free to contact me, and I'm sure ASEG will have that written somewhere, so it'll be easy to see, but that's me. So that's the imagery. Now, what about the grids? Okay, so let's say it's a great image, but you want to play with the grid yourself. Sure, too easy. So we see it over here in the side pane, and you see this little arrow. I don't know if you can see my cursor, I hope you can, but this little arrow there, it changes the layer details pane, and within there we get a bit of metadata. But what we want to do is click on the information button here. That'll open up a metadata catalog page, bit more metadata. There's some lineage statement down here, but the download is what you're probably keen on, and that's right here. So direct download link right there for you. Okay, so that's the grids, that's the imagery, but all right, last thing, what if you cared about the actual surveys that comprised the merge rather than the final merge itself? Okay, easy. Let's go back into our layer pane here. We'll close our geophysical imagery folder and let's open the geophysical surveys folder just below it. You can choose between company or government as you see fit, but let's have a look at company because we've put such focus on it so far. And let's turn on all airborne surveys. So there they are, and you'll recognize that's quite similar to one of the slides I showed earlier. So from here, all you need to do is just click on any given survey. So this one looks nice, and let's zoom in on it. You click on that, and a little pop-up box will appear. Contains a chunk of the metadata, not all of it, but it contains a lot of the sort of important metadata. And it also contains a download link. Click that, and it gives you sort of what you're after. You can download your zip file. You can, it tells you how big it is. You can have a little look at the thumbnail, and away we go. Also, there is the RIN, so the report that it's tied to, if you're interested in seeing that. In this view, so it depends on what view you're using, but so orange here are the open file surveys, and gray, if I just zoom in a bit on that and click on the gray, they're confidential, and we can see the scheduled release date for them. So this one, for instance, is scheduled, well, most of them are scheduled for this date, which will be the 1st of April next year, which coincidentally is also the release date of the MAG and RAD mergers, because they contain some of these data. So I think I'm probably going to leave it there, and I'll hand off to Astrid, who will give you a big rundown on all of the geophysics that's happening within the state, what's to come, and yeah, it's very exciting. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Right. Okay. So good to see so many people at this talk. And today I'm going to give you an update on our geophysical acquisition program. Some of the surveys I'll be talking about are proposed, some of them are completed. First, I'd like to start off with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Okay. All right, so today's talk, we've got a lot of geophysical surveys that are underway, and I'll split them up into various categories. So I'll talk about ones that the Geological Survey of New South Wales is doing and the projects that they're being done under, because we've got a couple of different projects that we're doing the surveys under. Then I will touch on other government geophysical surveys, and then I'll wrap up. Okay, so should just give you a little bit of information about a big project that we're doing a lot of geophysics under. It's called the MinEx Cooperative Research Centre. It's a national collaboration. It's going to run for 10 years and it started in 2018. It's got $220 million of funding. It involves state and federal government, CSIRO, leading Australian universities and the minerals industry. And its primary project aim is to improve our understanding of the geology undercover through various new technologies. And one of them, the main focus is a core tube drilling rig. And in New South Wales, we're going to focus on 5 areas, which I've got highlighted there in blue on the picture. And in these areas,
Hey, Astrid,
sorry, yes.
do you want to just double check that you're sharing the right screen?
Sharing screen 1. Sorry. Share screen. Oh, yeah. Sorry, didn't click it twice. Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. Right. So as you can see on the image there, we've got 5 areas that we're going to be focusing on, and we're going to be doing stratigraphic drilling in them. And to help us with the stratigraphic drilling, we're going to do some geophysics. So we're going to fill in some gaps in our coverage to help the geologists map the geology before we go in and drill. And we're going to do AEM over each of the areas and possibly some gravity, but we might not have to do that with some stuff that's in the works. Okay. Right. So the first survey that we did under this project was in Cobar. It was a big airborne EM survey, and it was a collaboration with Geoscience Australia. We flew it in 2019 over 2 of our national drilling kind of areas, North and South Cobar. And all this data is currently available on MinView for download and for viewing. And we're working on an interpretation report, which should be due out in at the end of this year. Now, MinView is great for viewing our data. And we're going to flip to MinView. And I'm just going to show you where you can go and view this data, or at least just show you where it is. Okay, so at the moment, it is in geophysical surveys under Cobar EM, but it will be moving to imagery. We're going to have a new slot up here just for all of our AEM curtains. And we've got multiple surveys that were done in conjunction with the Cobar one. There's some infill as well. All this is going to be moving to geophysical imagery. And once you click that and add it to the screen, there's one more important step you've got to do. You've got to go over here to the 3D button and launch the 3D view. So now if I scroll in, we should start seeing the curtains. We've also got all the flight lines. And to pan and tilt, press the control button and your left mouse button. So this is extremely powerful viewer, and you can add geology, you can add other geophysics, you can add drill holes. We've got all sorts of stuff in, all goodies in MinView for you to help with your investigations and interpretations. Okay, I will go back to my talk. This one, okay. So as part of the work we've done with this AEM data, I mentioned we've done interpretation, and we're looking at the modelling of the weathering. We're picking out the base of weathering, the depth of weathering, where some faults are, where we've found conductors and groundwater. And we're going to get that out hopefully to the public in by December, I'm hoping. And we've also made some 3D models, and we're going to package that up with some reports and also get those out by the end of the year, hopefully, fingers crossed. Okay. So this year we flew another survey for Minex, and GA helped out with this one as well. It was over the Mundy area, which is just north of Broken Hill. And this data has been released for this event, and it is available to download on MinView. And the 3D curtains will be coming soon. And I will just go back to MinView and exit 3D mode, go back to 2D mode and zoom out. And I'm just going to show you where you can access the AEM data. So you go to the layers, we go down to our geophysical surveys, and under the company, no, sorry, under government, it's a government AEM survey, add the government one. You can see there's quite a few large scale government surveys available in here. Now, we've added the Eastern Resources Corridor done by Geoscience Australia for the Exploring for the Futures program, but also in here, in this block here is the Mundy data, which you can now download. All you have to do is click on that and then you'll be able to download it. Okay, going back to my talk. So Sam mentioned that there's that we've done a survey over Cobar. We've done MagRad, and we did this to support MinEx CRC, and it was another project with Geoscience Australia. And it's basically been done to fill in gaps because we have coverage over that area that's been an amalgamation of government and old company data, a lot of which is no longer at the kind of specifications which we would use in a modern survey. And many of them were done without the radiometrics channel because they just were done back in the 80s or earlier. So this data is in the final stages of being processed, getting ready for release. We hope to have it out in the next couple of weeks. And Sam will include that, like I said, into his Statewide Merge, which should be in April 2022 for release. Okay. Now, the next survey that we're going to do, the next AEM survey in New South Wales, is one that we're planning to do over Forbes. And this is a proposed survey shape. It's not finalized yet. And it will support MinEx CRC, be a collaboration with Geoscience Australia. And it's got good potential in this area for groundwater and minerals. And we haven't decided whether or not to go 2.5 Ks or 5 Ks. There's going to be a lot of landholders, so there'll be a lot of community consultation, and that'll be a factor in the survey planning. Okay, so moving on to one of our other projects that we've got going. We have a droughtproofing project, which we have received funding for, and this project will involve various departments working together, looking to find areas that have aquifers or could be used for aquifers. So we're looking for large basins or areas with porous sandstones that we could pump water into when we have excess water, which we do occasionally have in New South Wales. At the moment, the Bankanya Trough, the Yathong and Ivanhoe Trough have been mentioned as areas to look at, and recently people have been throwing around ideas around Wagga, and we're looking at doing suitable geophysics for those areas. Some of the techniques mentioned so far have been more AEM, some seismic, and maybe some ground EM along the seismic. We might also do MT and a few other things. This is all still very much up in the air. Okay. And just to throw, just to mention the business as usual work that we're always doing is the work that Sam has been talking about, the statewide merge. It really is a huge, hugely important product to produce. And when you go through and look at the high resolution surveys and the quality of data that we can incorporate, it makes huge sense to spend money to produce it, because when you look at all the surveys out there and tally the amount of the value of them, it looks like there's about $31 million worth of MagRad data, and 40% of that is probably from private companies. So incorporating open file data it just makes sense, and I'm sure everybody really appreciates having that high resolution data that Sam's worked so hard to produce. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some other government surveys that are in the works, or some of them have already completed some geophysical surveys. So Geoscience Australia has been doing a lot of work for Exploring for the Future, and some of that has come into New South Wales. They have flown 20-kilometre line spacing AusAEM through what they call the Eastern Resources Corridor, which is this grey area over on the map, the dark grey area. And they're looking to do infill associated with that, and they're going to do some seismic over the Broken Hill area and Curnamona into the Delamerian, and probably some MT to infill the Auslan project. So they're going to call that the Kernamona Cube. And like I mentioned, and like you've seen, the AusAEM stuff is available on GA's portal, and also we've got bits of it in, we've got the New South Wales component into MinView, and we're looking to get the curtains added so that you can have 3D AEM curtains for viewing in MinView. Another project that's in the works is one that's being done by our water department, and this will be done with Geoscience Australia. And they're looking to do AEM along the Darling River to map out where they've got groundwater, where the water is really saline, where they've got incursions into their weirs of saline water, and also where they've got water leaking through faults in the geology. So this one is hopefully going to happen in the next year, and it's going to be really high resolution. The line spacing on this varies from about 250 meters up to about 5 kilometers. Now, I mentioned Auslan. Auslan is a magnetotelluric project. It's been run over Australia. It's been led by Geoscience Australia, and New South Wales has been helping out and doing work on this project since 2016. And it's taken a lot longer than we expected it to take. We've got 3 sites to go. And the reason it's taken so long is that we've had to operate through multiple bushfire seasons, floods, we've had a mouse plague, and we're currently going through a pandemic. Now, that's pretty much all of the kind of biblical plagues you could get. We expect the rain of toads will occur when the survey moves into Queensland, and they can, I'm sure they will deal with that very well. So all this MT data is available on MinView and on the GA portal for download. And you can also view cross sections of the modelling as well. It's a very powerful technique for imaging the crust. And another powerful technique for imaging the crust is Ozerae. It's just getting started, really. In New South Wales, it should be coming in next year. There'll be 20 sites set up. It's passive seismic, and it'll be a GA lead. That's going to be another great data set coming to everyone. So yeah, we are very busy. And just to give a summary of all those surveys, we've got GAs, Darling, Kernamona, Delamerian, kind of, I think I got that acronym around the way. AusAEM, we've got some infill, we've got seismic and MT coming. Our water department's going to do AEM along the Darling River, and the Geological Survey of New South Wales and GA have been working on multiple surveys and will continue to work on multiple surveys over AEM projects, MT and passive seismics and magnetic and radiometrics. And of course, we've got a drought proofing plan, which is still being formulated, but it's going to be a very interesting space and very interesting project to work on. So there's a lot of large data sets that have come out and even more coming to you guys. And that's where I will wrap up. Please feel free to contact me about any information that you need or where you can get your hands on the data from these surveys. Okay.
Thanks for your talk, Astrid, and thanks, Sam, as well. I really enjoyed it. In case anyone has any burning questions, we might just wait around for a few minutes and see if any pop up. I see we've answered David's question already.
I can answer that publicly if you want, so people can hear it.
Yep.
Okay, so David asked, did I create upgraded line data sets for the 150 odd open file surveys that integrated into the merge? And if so, are they available for download? And my answer was basically along the lines of only when necessary. So for the ones that went into the merge, it wasn't typically necessary because they were intentionally the higher quality surveys. A lot of the older stuff, so like that QAQC I showed with the reformatting of the NCOM stuff, yes, that's all available. And what you can download through MinView using the survey download option that I showed, what you get through there is the best and final product.
Got another question.
I've got a question for you. I was looking at the grids that you've merged and the resolution of them. And I noticed that there's not really a hell of a lot of 100-meter surveys there. There's a beautiful one that I flew over Gloucester and up the north coast there. But what is the value in creating a 25-meter grid when probably, 90% of your surveys are 200 meters or more?
Yeah, it's a fair question, but the value lies in making the most out of those 10% of surveys that you've got, and especially because they're in highly prospective areas as well. So having the ability to do a 25-meter cell size and then be able to zoom right down on those areas really enhances it. Whereas if it was still 50 meters, there's kind of no point even including those surveys.
I guess now in an age of broadband, it won't stop your computer for several hours. So
no, it's only 8 gig. Come on, everyone
if you can, yeah. I guess if you can, you may as well. Yeah. But I just wondered. That's all right. You might have another question, I think, now.
Yeah. Do you want to chair, Jim?
I can, if you like. Okay. So there's a question from Phil. Sam, how did you go? How did you determine the bearing value in the selection algorithm? Manually? Question mark.
That was tricky. It took a little while to figure out. So we've got a geological provinces shapefile, and using an intersect tool within ARC, we were able to sort of figure out where each survey intersected, and that covered it for 95% of them. And then the last few kind of did have to be, all right, well, that intersects both of them, and just a little bit of human interactivity at the end there.
Okay. There's another one from David Allen. He says, Tamworth still seems to have only 1,600 metre line spacing. For that priority groundwater source, when will better data be available there?
Do you want to take this, Astrid?
Yeah, okay. So we have trouble getting funding for flying MagRad surveys over the east coast of Australia. There's two reasons we have trouble. One of them is because we are in mineral resources, and people assume that when we're doing our surveys, it's all the data is useful for is for minerals. And if you're looking for groundwater, the MagRad data is not as useful as, say, AEM. So we don't have quite the, we don't have as much permission. We can't get the permission to go in and fly and get the funding for these surveys. The other thing is, of course, there's a lot more population out there. Flying these surveys becomes more logistically a nightmare, and dealing with the community consultation and community engagement. I would love to fly the whole of the East Coast with much better resolution data. It's just a matter of finding the right project, the right timing, and the funding, of course. So, yeah. Yeah,
that makes sense. When we flew that big survey for Pangaea, we were astounded that it was all still 1,600 meters, but it makes sense what you just said. There's another question from Rod Lawrence here. He says, are there similar plans to do a similar process for other data sets, e.g. gravity?
Yeah, g'day, Rod. Actually, last year we snuck out an update to the gravity merge. It went very under the radar. Like the difference with that one is there's not really a wealth of company stuff out there, and what is there is just these tiny postage stamps. So what we did last year for the update was just take the ANGD curated by GA. So thanks, Phil, thanks, Richard, and basically just regridded that and ran it through some new processing. Again, thanks, Richard Lane. And we actually did update that last year. It just didn't get much fanfare. It wasn't too much of an update, especially compared to the mag. And other stuff, there is some rumblings of perhaps a DEM update, but I'm not going to commit to anything just yet.
Okay. We don't have any other questions, but I did think of another one. With all this work that's going on with MinEx, is there going to be petrophysics? Are you planning to do petrophysics with that? I'm just asking because I do petrophysics. So just wondering, how are you collecting data sets to help people better interpret these data sets as well?
Okay, so for the drilling, there will certainly be petrophysics associated that with the drill core that they log, or the chips really. And yes, there's PhD students and other students, and I believe Sam even knows one of the people working on the petrophysics. And yeah, so yes, they're in the works. I'm not as up to date on the mechanisms and the scope of these projects as I would like it to be, but I just tend to get stuck on geophysical acquisition. That's my kind of focus and zoom there.
That's all good. All right, well, I don't think, oh no, we've just had another question come in just then from Cameron Cairns. Great talk, Sam and Astrid. Has the 5-year sunset on mineral exploration data clause commenced in New South Wales yet? Do you anticipate many additional surveys being added? And did this in part prompt the development of the workflow for ready adaptation of surveys becoming available sooner?
Yeah, so that's a fun issue, the old sunset clause, which is now the ARRP, the annual report release policy. That is why the April Fool's release date for everything next year, 1st of April. So yeah, that's yes, basically, but the fun hasn't stopped, so we're still working away with that in the background. And yes, that's what prompted getting the process in order so that we can just keep iterating into it, keep flowing stuff into it in future.
Okay, I've got one here from Des Fitzgerald, and I suspect this is a joke, but he says, do you plan to pattern drill New South Wales?
I would love to. I'm just not sure whether to do it in a zigzag or just to do stripes. So
there won't be any more geophysics to do if we pattern drill it, hey Des? Okay, I think we will wrap it up there, but I just wanted to thank you both and thank Josh for hosting. Very interesting talk, and look forward to seeing more of this over the next few years. Thank you very much. What do we do now? I think we just can it. We just leave, stop.
Yeah, I'll just go to press stop recording.